Theism is a widespread conception of God. Almost all the world's prominent contemporary religions are theistic. Theism is the belief that the ultimate ground of things, the basis of all, is a single supreme reality. This supreme reality, or God, is conceived to be intrinsically complete or perfect. It is likewise thought to be all-wise, good, and powerful. Theism, then, is a belief in a personal God. The illustration here depicts this principle of a conscious being that transcends the universe and yet personally directs it, as the descending lines from the clouds here symbolize. Aristotle said that God was the unmoved, and yet he was the first mover behind all else. St. Anselm said that God was a being than which none greater could be thought. The objection to theism, which is so popular in our existing religions, is summarized by the question: why would an all-wise being that created man let him make the errors that he does? Modern theology has tried in various ways to explain this obvious incongruity. Monotheism, as the name suggests, means the belief in a single God or deity. The earliest monotheistic formalized religion was the one proclaimed by Pharaoh Akhenaten in the 14th century BC. Akhenaten expounded that there is one God, the creator of all, at a time when polytheism, or the multiplicity of gods, was the common belief of the people. The symbol of this universal deity or power was the solar or sun disk, shown here in our illustration. The sun was not worshipped by Akhenaten. Rather, to him, it depicted the light and creative energy of the single God permeating the whole universe. He ordered his artists to always portray this symbol, which he called Aten, as shown here, with rays descending toward the earth and with hands at the end of each ray. This represented the creative force of the sole God, reaching down into the earth to bring forth all life and all things. Judaism was the next of the ancient religions to spread the monotheistic idea. To the Jews, the sole God was also anthropomorphic. That is, he and man were similar in image. He was thought of as a personal God by the Jews, as a benevolent father, men being his earthly children. The deists were a group of philosophers of the 16th century, principally centered in England. They established a creed which was to become known as Deism. Among its prominent supporters were such men as Toland, Collins, Tyndall, Chubb, and Morgan. In essence, the belief was that God made the universe and set it into motion. He laid down certain laws of nature and morality. Men were bound by them, but God thereafter was detached from their affairs. To explain this, let us look at our illustration. Illustration A depicts God, the deity or creator. Illustration B represents the universe, all reality which he created. He sets the universe into motion by a series of natural laws, and all things are subject to them alone. There is no personal intervention thereafter by the deity. To further understand this, Look at illustration C. It is a picture of a watch. We will use this as an analogy. The watchmaker, like a god, designs and fashions his creation. He then winds it and sets it into motion. After that, his work is done. The watch must function independently by the powers put into it by its maker. That, then, is the idea of deism in regard to man's relation to God. Pluralism is another conception of religion and of God. It is a belief that ultimate reality is not one, but may consist of numerous elements or attributes of equal status. For analogy, let us refer to our illustrations here. We have, as you will note, three separate symbols. The one on the left, the circle, depicts God. The triangle represents mind or consciousness in man. The square, we shall say, alludes to matter or the physical universe. Now, according to the doctrine of pluralism, mind and matter would not be subordinate to God alone. Rather, all three, God, mind, and matter, are independently equal in their influence. Simply put, the conception of pluralism is that no single factor accounts for the creation and continued existence of all reality. If one is a true theist, he would not recognize God and the physical world as being distinctly separate, as do most of the followers of our existing prominent religions that profess to be theists. Any idea of separation of reality is, in fact, pluralism. Dualism in religion is postulated by the belief in the existence of a good or benevolent divinity and, opposed to it, an evil personage. The first formal religion having this dualistic principle was Zoroastrianism. Our illustration represents the benevolent deity of Zoroastrianism, or Ahura Mazda, the god of light and goodness. The opposite polarity is the entity Ahriman, a malevolent being. This is depicted as the shadowy figure in our illustration. Ahura Mazda, the representative of light and goodness, and Ahriman, the representative of darkness and evil, are said to be in constant conflict with each other for the possession of the souls of men. A modern continuation of Zoroastrianism is the F.R.C sect of India. This dualism is also evidenced in the belief in Satan, appearing in the theology of Judaism, Christianity, and Islamism. No religion is purely monotheistic, that is, believing in a single deity if it recognizes a superhuman rival to God. The Orthodox Christian, for example, who accepts the idea of Satan, is not truly monotheistic in his belief. According to the theory and doctrines of monism, the universe is one, a coherent and organized whole. Its process goes on in accordance with uniform and natural principles. Monists are determinists. That is, they believe that all that exists proceeds by the determination of the one reality, call it God, absolute, or cosmic. Our illustration will aid us in understanding this conception. The circle represents the monad, the one, of which the idea of monism consists. From it radiate various lines. These depict all the different manifestations or expressions of the greater universe. These are all definitely a part of the one, the circle, but they are determined by it. That is, the nature of the one is such that it causes these different expressions. An objection to monism is that it makes man a puppet. He is and does only whatever is the rational process of the one. He cannot alter or deviate from the course of his own nature, which is part of and governed by this monistic whole. According to this concept, man never really changes anything. Whatever he does is part of an established process that he had to follow by virtue of what he is. Our illustrations here are of a star, a rose, and of man. They depict that all things, no matter how different in appearance, are of the nature of God, are of a part of him, according to the doctrine of pantheism. In pantheism, God is no one image or thing, but rather all things. Pantheism may be defined as God being the totality of all things, and also what yet may come to be. There is nothing which is not of God. That is, God permeates all things. God is not separate from things, but rather things are of the nature of God. Simply, the fundamental life principle in man, as well as the elements of his physical substance, are God. The doctrine of pantheism does not expound a vengeful or jealous God as do the theistic religions. God in pantheism is neither conceived as good or bad. Consequently, from the pantheistic point of view, such qualities as bad or good are not inherent in anything. Nothing in itself is bad or good, except as it relates to the human viewpoint. Science is empirical, objective, analytical. It concerns itself with causality, that is, cause and effect. Generally speaking, science takes the position that reality is colorless, soundless, and formless. Such qualities exist only in the minds of men. In many cultural centers today, the simple question arises, is there a God or none? To most men, God seems necessary as a cause, a purpose, a beginning and ultimate objective. However, from the strictly scientific point of view, God is an inferential cause. Let our illustration here help explain this idea. Illustration A is of a cue stick striking a billiard ball and causing it to enter a pocket. The apparent cause of the ball's entering the pocket is observable. It is not left to doubt or conjecture. Illustration B shows an apple falling to the ground from a tree. In this example, the cause of the falling apple, or gravity, is only inferred. Gravity is an inference, not an observable cause. So then, God is to most people an inferred cause of all reality, not an objectively experienced one. Here we have symbolized ideas in relation to the doctrine known as Absolutism. This conception expounds that the cosmos as a whole is absolute. By this is meant that it is unconditioned, infinite, self-determined, and self-sufficient. In it, everything has its place. This principle is illustrated by A, the circle shown on our screen. We can call the absolute God if it is not differentiated or separate from the things of reality. This is depicted in illustration B. The circle is the absolute, as God. The little x's in the circle represent that all things are contained equally in and are part of the nature of God. If we presume that the absolute is self-determined, that is, that it creates the particulars of reality out of its own nature, then the absolute is conscious. Illustration C represents the absolute consciously extending itself so as to cause all the multiplicity of things of which we are aware. There are a multitude of definitions of mysticism. Perhaps a succinct definition is the conscious union of self with God. This means that man comes to realize his oneness with God, the cosmic, the absolute, or universal mind, whatever term to him represents the primary cause of all. In our illustrations here, we depict certain fundamental mystical principles. Illustration A, the circle, represents the one. We shall call it the cosmic or divine consciousness. In the center, you will note a dot. This dot alludes to our personal self, our individual consciousness, which exists within the realm of the universal or divine consciousness. Thus, we are never separate or apart from this divine consciousness. In illustration B, the spiral in the circle represents the expanding of our individual consciousness through development. In other words, we become a more conscious part of the whole cosmic by this development, which in fact is the purpose of the Rosicrucian teachings and philosophy. Illustration C symbolizes cosmic consciousness. The little X mark symbolizes the consciousness of the cosmic extending itself in a circular motion into all things. The series of little circles represents various forms of manifestation, from inanimate to animate things, and thence up into conscious beings. You will note that the circles grow larger as they progress. Finally, the largest circle represents man, or any intelligent being who has a self-consciousness equal to or exceeding man's. This developed self-consciousness finally reaches a point of greater realization of its oneness with the cosmic. When this point has been reached, it means that the consciousness of the cosmic, extending itself and passing through the many forms of manifestations, comes to realize itself through the consciousness of such beings as man. Thus the circle is complete, and we have cosmic consciousness, or consciousness of the cosmic.
You understand this?